Every family's different. So yeah, don't feel, first of all, don't feel like you need to do things the way another family's doing them. And like you just mentioned too, start small. You can't try to incorporate everything at once, but just try to find one easy thing that you can do as a family. Start with that, and then, gradually kind of build it and grow from there.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to Life Inner Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Life Inner Show, we help people make more, work less, and have awesome lives. I am joined by my co-host today, working off of a remote, secret
undisclosed
location.
Yes,
that's right. Peter, well, Polish Peter. What's up, dude? I almost said Peter, your last name, but I don't want to reveal that.
Oh, we don't want to give that away. I mean, that might be look.
Yeah, the IRS might get that information. Like,
let's not mention those guys. All right, so listen. I have a question for you. Listen, you think you're a good parent? Those listening to, and you?
I think I'm a much better parent than I was like for my first daughter. You?
She was a good practice, right?
She was. Yeah, she did. I owe her an apology.
We practiced on the first one, and the second one kind of starts working, and some third one is like, just for his own. But here's the thing: the reason why I ask about it is because I think we as parents, a lot of times, don't feel like we're really good parents, right? Maybe we're failing or whatever the case may be. And I think the people that we have on this podcast today can help us answer a lot of those questions, because you can actually have a parenting plan, right, Wojo?
Yeah. Love it, man. And so we have on the episode, Derek and Amy Weichel. They are members in Life in Air, and they have really embarked upon this journey to really very clearly, kind of work through the process of what does it take to have a successful family? What does it take to be a successful parent? What are the kinds of things that are important to the success of your children, right? And really kind of categorize and put this together into a really cool acronym that I'll let them explain to you during the episode. But it's a really important thing, and I think it's a really approachable, manageable, practical way to do this. And you need a plan as a parent for what you want it to look like, because way too many parents just wing it, man.
Right. And that's a really cool thing. I know these people for a while. They're a great couple, great family. And it's one of those, I think, moments where you start thinking like, I could have an actual vision for my parenting, for my family. Like, I remember when I came into life and I'm like, can have a vision for my life? What? Nobody told me this. And this is another one of those moments. So I want you guys to just listen to this podcast, break out the notebook, because like Wojo said, go through the acronym so you can take notes. And then I would strongly suggest you pick up the book that they recommend under, because it's similar to the Life in Their book, and it's really good stories in there.
Awesome. Here's our interview right now. Let's go into it. Here's Derek and Amy Weichel. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to Life in Our Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Well, this is an awesome topic. It's very needed. And I'm actually, by the way, we've already told people what this is about when Peter and I did the intro. And so let's tell people about this topic of parenting. Like, and you guys have a very specific way you want to address this. And it's become kind of a passion for you. And you've really run with this really cool, really cool kind of like educational slash coming alongside people and helping them learn to be better parents, especially as Christians. So how did this start? Like, where did this passion come from? Like, why did you become interested in this?
Yeah, so it probably goes way back to probably 8 years ago, when our kids were very little. We had 4 kids, age 5 and under. And I was really like in survival mode. Like, Derek was busy at work too. And we just were surviving with the kids because they were so little. And we were just doing what everyone around us was doing. We'd hear, our friends had this suggestion. And so we'd try that, or, just get through the day. And so it wasn't being very intentional. And so that kind of started us off on not a great path. I mean, we were still fine, but we weren't maybe thriving. It was just kind of survival. And so after that, we started to be a little bit more intentional with some of the education stuff, because we heard about some non-traditional education. And so as the kids were getting older, we're like, well, that might be a good option for our kids, rather than just going to the same school that Derek was going to, because that our kids literally were living like Derek's life, like the same school. We went back to the same community that he lived in. And so we were like, well, maybe that's not the best fit for our family and for our kids, because
we don't need more Derek's. Like we need.
We don't want everyone to be like just like Derek.
Right. Well, hold on. Before you go there, like
Derek,
like
you want to speak up about that? I mean, I don't know.
He's like, wait a second, what?
Hold on.
That's not
I'm on your side, man.
She tells me that all the time, so that's no surprise to me.
but here you are, like you're 5 years ago, you're a brand new parent, and like it's like what, and it's so funny because like I think so many parents just go into this and they're like they have no clue, like they can't, you know what I mean, like they don't know, and so you found yourself like, whoa, like what, like, and so, and by the way, how many kids do you have?
We have four. So our oldest was a boy, and then so he was 5 when we had our youngest, and then the other 3 are girls. And so we had, one who was very active, and then we had 3 that were all full of drama sometimes, and sometimes with each other. So
it's all within a very narrow window, really. These kids aren't spaced out
5 years,
right? Yeah. So you're like, just chugging them out, and like so you had to kind of figure this out quickly. You're like, okay, this is like we need to figure this out. And so, so you start kind of looking at these different things, and like so I kind of interrupted there, but like I just want the listener to understand like how quickly you can find yourself really overwhelmed as a parent and confused, and like you're like, what am I doing? I don't want to screw my kids up, but my like everything's so different now, and like how do I find the answers for this? And so there's a real need for that.
Yeah, right. Like Amy was saying, I think we were being very reactive at that point, and just honestly, like she said, just kind of parenting the way we'd been raised. Well, this is what our parents did, so let's do this for our kids. And we did probably read a few parenting books here or there, but we weren't real intentional about implementing any of the things we read there, just because we didn't probably know how to, and we were too busy, honestly, to implement anything that we read about too. So
it took a lot of time to like even just think about. I mean, you're just surviving from day to day, like. We made it through to the end of the day. Okay, now it's time to sleep, finally. Or I'll get the dishes done, and then I'll go to sleep. And then the next morning, it starts all over again early, because when they're little, they wake up so early. And so you just don't have a lot of time to yourself to even just sit and plan. So we started looking at different educational options, thinking, oh, there might be something different. And we were starting to be a little bit more intentional at that point a couple of years later. But still, we didn't have like a real focus or
have a plan.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so, so then we met with Steve Cook here from Life on Air. He's our coach. And so we met with him, and, we were like trying to be more, proactive with our parenting, not so reactive. So then we asked him in one of our one-on-one sessions, and we just said, Steve, is there anything that, we could do to improve our parenting? How can we be better parents? And he just looked at us and he's like, well, what do you have for your plan? Like, what's your plan for parenting? And we were just like, wow, like we were thinking about it, and we're like, these precious children that God entrusted to us, we were just kind of winging it. And we didn't have a real well thought out plan for raising our children. And so that kind of really caused us to like think, okay, let's really study this. And we're like, well, how do you go about creating a plan for parenting? And so then Derek did a lot of research, and he was looking around, and there's like nothing out there that worked for us. There just really was nothing. You type in parenting plan or plan for parenting, and
it's not really, at least we couldn't find any good resources to help us develop that kind of that intentional plan that we were hoping or looking for.
Yeah. So we went through the process of just kind of similarly to like creating a Life on Air vision. Like we had a family vision, like a vision for our family. And then we evaluated our family's strengths and weaknesses, and the culture of our family. What kind of atmosphere do we have? What's the culture of our family? And then that helped us. Once we had evaluated that, then we could kind of go into some more areas, specific areas, you know, like similarly to our like your vision, you can look at different areas, like your spiritual and your health and all of those kind of things.
So I imagine one of those plans that you guys had in there is just to have more kids so they can parent each other, right? No, well, on the serious side of things, because one of the things that you mentioned is like having a vision for your own family. I mean, who does that, right? You don't really think about that kind of stuff. And the one thing that kind of jumped out at me is you talked about the culture, the family culture. Tell a little bit about this, maybe give an example. What does that look like for you guys? Because you're Christian, right? And you know, what's that culture look like? How would someone design that? What would they talk about?
Mm-hmm. You want to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for culture, there's several things that you look at. And first is just, you know, what types of things are rewarded in your family and which things in your family are looked down on. So, for example, like you mentioned, we first came up with a family vision. And the importance of that family vision is just to make sure we're all walking together. I think, you know, in some aspects, even Amy and I, you know, we didn't really have a clear vision of exactly what are we trying to achieve as a family. She had her ideas, I had my ideas, you know, maybe the kids had their ideas of what they wanted, but we weren't unified on, okay, what really is our main goal as a family. So the first thing we did was come up with a family vision, and then we came up with our values. So we have 5 family values. And so we decided, okay, well, these are our values and this is what we want. And these values will help to define our family culture. So one of the ways we do that is, so I guess our values, we can just tell you what those are. They're Christian, hardworking, kind-hearted, generous givers, and adventurers. So we literally go over those 5 values with our as a family every day. And then the other way that we reinforce that is anytime we catch our kids living out one of those family values, then we have what we call a star system. And if they get stars, then they can kind of trade that in for some screen time or for money. But anyway, when we catch them living out one of those family values, then they get rewarded with stars. So that helps to reinforce that culture that we want in our family. And vice versa, if we see them doing something, say one of our kids is doing something that's not consistent with the values, if they're doing something that's not kind-hearted, then they get a punishment, or they get, usually right now, just because of the stage our kids are in, what we found is it works best to take something away that they really value. And we usually give them about 30 minutes of screen time per day, and they really enjoy that screen time. So if they're if they're not upholding our family values, usually we'll start taking away some of that screen time to remind them, hey, you are not being consistent with the culture we want in our family. So that's kind of how we went about it. I mean, some other things you can look at in your culture are like, what are the symbols in your household? The symbols will reflect your culture. We have a family altar in our entryway. It kind of helps to reflect that, hey, this is a Christian family. It reminds us and anyone who comes into our home of that value. And then the other thing too is, what stories are epic in your family? Like, what stories do you like to talk about all the time and say, hey, that was really cool. That was a really fun thing we did as a family. Is that a story that you want, your kids telling your grandkids in a positive way to reflect your family? Or are they stories you're like, oh, that's going to be an embarrassing one to tell my grandkids in 20 years? So those are all at least a few aspects of how we work to really strengthen that culture we want for our family, not only for the short term, but we always say play the long game. So we're always thinking, generationally as well. So the way we look at it is the values that our kids have that we're establishing in our family. It's probably pretty likely that our kids will have those same values in their families when they get older, and possibly even our grandchildren and great grandchildren. So it's not only for our family now, but for hopefully even generations into the future.
Wow, that's very cool. I love that. So one of the things that I hear you guys say is like, grow the vision, the values, the symbols around the family, and when you guys coming together to make sure on the same page. So out of curiosity, when you guys were writing that, were your kids included into that process? Like, did you ask them, or were they included in any way?
So especially with the family values, and with the vision, in our guiding principles and all that, we had the kids all together with us at the table. And even though Lily was pretty small when we did it, so she wasn't really writing a lot So she drew pictures of what she wanted to include. And sometimes it had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but she felt included because she was participating. And other times it was, we could use that information too. But then they kind of take ownership of it too, because some of the same words that they were coming up with were going on our board. We had sticky notes and they were writing down words that they thought were important for our family, and they went up on the board, and so they took ownership of it too. I think that really helped build the culture of our family too, as it is like unifying it too.
Well, it's interesting because they're pretty young, right? So it's not like they have a full their cortex is like, not quite fully developed, but you can get their involvement and their buy-in even from a young age and make them feel like they're part of this. Now, do you see this evolving as they get older? Is this something that you feel like you'll see it kind of change or morph or evolve at all? Or do you feel like this is like, it's kind of static?
Yeah. Do you mind if I kind of go into what the steps of our process are right now? And that might help kind of explain kind of what that looks like in the future. So basically we divide it into 7 steps. First thing that we want every family to do is, like Amy mentioned, look at their families. What are our family strengths? What are our family weaknesses? What's our family culture? I think you really have to have a good understanding of what those look like to start before you can really dive into the process. And then our process has 7 steps. And we can remember them with the acronym STEWARD, STEWARD. So the first step is to seek God. And so we just have them kind of look at the Bible. What does God want you to do as parents? And we actually have another acronym to help us remember that. And that one's ADEPT. We want to be adept parents. So the first one is attentive parents. Second one is discipline. Third one is encourage. Fourth one is provide. And then the fifth one is to teach. So that's the first step. The second step is T, which stands for target or trajectory. And that's kind of what we talked about earlier, having a family vision, values to make sure everyone's moving in the same direction together. The third one's explore options. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier too. Really, there's a lot of different ways you can parent. And maybe, the way you're doing it is fine, but it's going to be different for every family. So just because your friend's doing it this way or your parents did it this way doesn't mean that's the best way for your family. So it's important to spend some time looking at those options, decide, okay, based on our strengths, weaknesses, and our vision, what option is best for our family. And then the W stands for write it down. So kind of like Life on Air, how they encourage you to write down your vision. We think it's important in the process too. Write down, from a discipline standpoint, what are we going to do as parents? From a technology standpoint, if our kids are old enough to date, what's that plan look like? A lot of different aspects that you can look at just based on your family, your children's ages. Just write that down and say, okay, well, we actually sat down, talked about this, and wrote down a plan. And then the next one is action. So how do you actually implement this plan into your life? And there's some steps similar to what we learned in Life on Air, honestly, that can help you implement some of those, some of that plan into your life. The R then stands for, this is finally getting to what you talked about, is talking about reviewing and revising. So yeah, exactly like you were mentioning, as your kids get older, as your family matures, this is going to change over time, I think. So I think we generally say, try to sit down and review your family vision and values probably about every 2 years or so. It might stay the same, and that's good if it does, but things may have changed, and you might say, hey, this thing that was a value to our family 2 years ago, it's not as important anymore. So maybe we're going to start a new value, or maybe we're going to add a value. So yeah, I think it is very important to try to at least have a general time frame to say, hey, we're going to sit down and review this on a regular basis. And then the actual parenting plan, what do you have written down for all these different aspects of your parenting plan? Again, we think that should be reviewed fairly regularly too. We probably do it every a couple months. I think if you can do it at least 2 or 3 times a year, just to remind yourself what's in that plan, remind the kids some of the things might not be relevant anymore as your kids get older. So yeah, I definitely think it's important to review that on a regular basis and then make changes accordingly. And one of the things Amy and I try to do whenever we do make a change, especially as our kids are getting older, we try to talk to them about it first of all, or say, hey, this is how we used to do things. This is our new plan. And this is why we're doing it, because it's consistent with our vision or values. So to make sure they understand what that change is. So there's no surprises from their standpoint either. And then finally, the last step of our process is D, which is direct others. And so we just say that when you're finally on a good path on your parenting journey, it's important to kind of help other parents who might be struggling on their journey. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. So that kind of is, yeah. So yeah, exactly. And then, you can go through that whole process, not as detailed, but at least go through that process on a somewhat regular basis as your family matures, to make modifications when you need to.
Hey, so let me interrupt this episode. And before we get back into it, here's what I want to share with you guys. One of the things that we do throughout the year, all over the country, is we do this event called Business Builder Event. This is the event where we literally outline, help you figure out and create a business that you love and a business that support your life. One of the things that we found over the years that many people become basically a slave or work an employee to their business, and they're working so much in their business that they don't actually get to live their life. And in this particular workshop, we help you redesign that, a business that supports your life. So what do you want to have for them, Bojo? What do we have for them because of that?
Man, well, Peter, because they are loyal listeners, and I know they're tuned in every week, and they've told everyone in their life about the Life in Air Show podcast, we have a very, very special offer for you. Now, by the way, I don't know how long we're going to offer this, so this isn't forever. But if you go to lifeinair.com right now and you go to the events tab and then you go to the Business Builder Workshop, you can, when you pick the event you want, when you go to that checkout page, there's a little place right there. It says enter promo code. And guess what? We have a promo code for you for 50. That's 50% off the ticket for the Business Builder Workshop by entering the promo code podcast into the promo code field. Instantly, you'll get a 50% savings. You'll see it right there on the screen, and you will be registered for that event. And here's the cool thing. You will be off to the races to create a life and a business that complement each other for the first time, maybe ever. And it's amazing.
One more thing I want to share with you before we jump back into the episode is this. One of the participants at our recent podcast, he was in a hot seat. We do these hot seats in front of the room, and we kind of dissect their business. And one suggestion that he got them, he made the change, went home, made the change, and pretty much within a few months went into stage 4, meaning into his business, that the business basically supported his life. The income that was coming, the cash flow that was coming into his business, by making that one change, started living in a way that he doesn't have to work for the business works for him. So yes. I would encourage you guys, head over to the website, learn about this event, type in podcast, and we'll see you on the next event. Now, let's get back into the episode.
Well, so you just covered a lot there, and this is actually, you have a book, though, about this, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so our book is called A Chance to Change. It just came out recently here. And
exciting.
We kind of thought about how to write a book to include what we wanted to talk about. And, you could go the nonfiction route, but it wouldn't be as... Yeah. And it wouldn't be as exciting. So we kind of, after, reading, we read the book Life on Air, and we kind of liked how it was more of an allegory. And you pick up all the lessons learned by reading a fictional book. And so we kind of like that. And we talked to Steve about that too. And he liked that idea also. And so we created a family who everything on the outside looks great, but underneath, especially the mom can feel that something's not quite right. And so there's something better that they could be doing as parents and as a family. And so then there's another family that kind of comes alongside them and kind of mentors them through the steps that we just outlined with the STEWARD acronym. and kind of goes into more detail with that. And some of the people who we've had read it so far said, it's non-judgmental, and any family can kind of put themselves into the situation and take something from it, because it's not like a prescription, like you must do all these things, but it's more like the guidelines and to get you started to incorporate it in your own family's life and situation.
Right. Well, because some families they're just winging it day to day. And like, if they, to feel like what you've laid out for them could be intimidating and overwhelming. So like, how do you get started? How do you just start the little stuff? And so that's things you guys address as well, I'm guessing, like where they can, hey, this thing resonates with me a lot, and I'm just gonna start here, or I'm gonna start there, or and so that it gives them kind of choose your own adventure as a parent kind of option based on what resonates with them.
I like how you pointed out, choose your adventure.
It is an adventure with kids, that's for sure.
Yep, that's for sure. One of the things we try to emphasize in the book, especially, is every family's different. So don't feel, first of all, don't feel like you need to do things the way another family's doing them. And like you just mentioned too, start small. You can't try to incorporate everything at once, but just try to find one easy thing that you can do as a family. Start with that, and then gradually kind of build and grow from there. And you may find too, and I think we found this as well, that some of the things that we think that we've read or heard about, we're like, hey, that sounds cool, we'll try it in our family. And then we find out, that's not really the best, and that doesn't work in our family. So don't be afraid to try something, say, hey, that's not the right fit for our family, and then, stop. And, so just because you started doesn't mean you have to continue if that's not the best fit for your family.
Yeah. And just remember, it's playing the long game. Little changes over time make a big difference. And I think that's kind of part of life on there too, is like you're making small changes throughout a long period of time after a while, like I think 5 years ago, we're totally in a different place than what I would have imagined, 5 years before. And so just making those little changes, day-to-day things. So even if it seems overwhelming, just start small and slowly adding in different things or eliminating things that maybe aren't part of your family's vision anymore.
So who really should check out what you guys are doing? Who do you feel like would benefit most from this?
Jason Vojo.
Peter, it's too late for you. Your kids are grown, man. You've already screwed them up.
That's right.
I don't know. I think, generally we're focused on, Christian parents who feel like their life is just busy, chaotic, reactive, that they're like, hey, look, we're doing the best we can, but there's got to be a better way out, better way to do this. Yeah. The challenge, though, that we understand for most families is, the way we were when our kids were young. It just feels like you're just trying to survive, and how am I ever going to sit down and do this as a family? But that's why it's important to at least know that there's a system there that you can use, and just start with the steps or the process that's easy for you and that works for your family. What do you think, though?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think even like my mom read it and she thought it was, so she's a grandma and she thought it was helpful. And I know there's a couple other older ladies that were like, who read it for us and said, they'd be willing to, there were good things that they could use as a grandma, even like to help create a culture of, a better family culture for their children or their grandchildren, even, and their children. And so I think anyone could really benefit from it. So I don't want to say exclusively it should only be parents. And like there are good life lessons too, and maybe even something that would help along someone else's journey that they could glean from it. Or even if you think everything's going fine, that's what we like to read books a lot. And so even if we don't necessarily think we need help in an area, we'll still read about it. And then, we always glean a few things here and there that we can add to our family life too. So I think mostly Christian parents, but pretty much anybody who might be interested in the book.
I love that. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing. So I got few questions that popped into my head. The first question that I have for you is this: if I have teenage kids, should I still be doing this? Or is it too late?
Yeah.
Dealing with teenagers and all that kind of stuff. What would you say?
I would say it's never too late. I mean, even if you have grown children, you can still build relationships and stuff. You might have to modify some things, but the guidelines are loose enough that you can just incorporate it into how your family situation is. And you never stop being a parent. You're always, somebody's, mom or dad. If you have kids, even when you're old, and they're young and as they have families of their own, you can still, like, your role changes. You can still become more of a mentor. But I think it would, any age you should. And also in the book itself, there's actually a teenager in the family that's busier. He's actually just started college. So the boy's like 18, 19. And so they're even able to like incorporate the lessons that they learn even with him too. So, and help guide him on a better path.
Awesome. His name isn't Peter by any chance, is it?
No.
They cut that character like at first draft.
All right. So that's awesome. I love that you answer it that way because I think it can be used for anybody at any time. It's never too late and it's never too early, I don't think. Yeah. So here's my next question. As you guys are going through this journey and you incorporated this vision and sounds like few families already kind of looked at it, that kind of stuff. Do you see as the time goes, challenges from the kids challenging the vision, for instance, Johnny, gets to be on the phone for 3 hours at home. Why can't I? Those kinds of conversations. And then, is there a challenges? And if so, how do you handle that?
Where do you want to start with?
Yeah. No, I think that's realistic to expect that there will be challenges from your kids throughout the different phases. I think though, I guess one of them that kind of recently came up for us is our son. He's just turned 13, and so he's kind of one of the. He was always asking about, when can I get a cell phone? My friends have cell phones. And so that's when we were able to say, well, we want to make sure we're doing this intentionally. So we kind of did some research, looked into different phones, looked into different pros and cons of our son having a phone, kind of talked through the process with him, and then came up with a plan. Okay, well, we're going to get you a phone, but here's the guardrails. So I think that's a good way to look at it is, your kids probably will have some challenges to your plan or even your vision or your values. But I think it's important that when those situations come up to sit down with them and say, okay, well, here's what we currently have. Now let's maybe discuss this together and decide, is it appropriate to make changes to this plan? And we'll talk that through with you. And if you can help us to understand how a new plan will be better for our whole family and still be consistent with our vision and values, then we're happy to make that change. But just make sure that, they understand, first of all, why you made your original plan, that you're willing to listen to them, but any new plan still has to be, best for your family and still consistent with those vision and values that you came up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to talk to them about it too, because then you're including them in the whole family aspect of it. And then even sometimes the younger kids, they were also included in our discussion of the cell phone too, so that they knew, okay, so when I turn 13, then I will get one too, as the plan is now. And these are the guardrails that will be in place also. And if we make any changes, we'll bring them all together and talk about it too.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's awesome because someone listening right now may feel like either this is overwhelming, or some people might even feel like, wow, this feels like a lot of like restrictions, and it sounds very kind of legalistic to have this. But I'd encourage, if you're thinking that right now, this whole idea is really to equip and empower your kids and your family to be successful in a lasting and meaningful way, in a way that serves them. And so it's not about like rules. It's about really helping them foster the character, the skills, the traits, the things that will allow them to really rise to their highest and best use in terms of like as people, like as humans, as individuals who will make a difference, and have these great things in their life and expand and avoid potentially some of the things that, when you're not intentional about your parenting and how you how you conduct your family can happen. They can seep in, they can sneak in through the cracks, and you find all of a sudden you find yourself in a position you never thought to, because you just never took the time to plan it. And so that's where I think the value of what you guys have created is really, really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. I think, I mean, to be honest, it is a lot of work up front if you're really going to go through all the steps and go through this whole process. So that's for sure. But I think, it's kind of two things with that. I think once you've actually worked through the process, then it actually makes your family life a lot more fun and focused, connected, and purposeful. And Amy can give you one example just from a discipline standpoint, how that's kind of worked for our family after going through it. But then the other thing too, like you mentioned, is and Amy mentioned before too, I think playing the long game. So we're not looking at this as just something that's helping our family or our kids right now, but we're trying to figure out what's going to be best for our family and our kids, for not only, 20 years from now, but even 120 years from now. And then you want to share the kind of the discipline example that has made things like a lot easier for our family.
Yeah. So we have, as part of our parenting plan, one of the topics or sections is discipline. And so we have kind of, in general, like boundaries, and then there's consequences if they cross the boundaries, which is kind of a general parenting thing. But then we had trouble with one of our daughters who was hitting. When she was mad, she would hit, and not just, a light tap. It was hard. And so it was becoming a problem. And I'm much more a reactive person. So I'm just like,
her back. You're like,
I was just like, what do I do now? Because it was usually her sibling. It was usually she was hitting her sibling. And I'm just like, what do I do now? Because, we didn't have this specific thing. Like, what should I do? And I'm not necessarily very consistent either. So like maybe one time I'd be like, okay, you have to sit out for a little bit from this, or you have to lose some screen time, or, so it wasn't very consistent. So then when I talked to Derek about it, he's like, all right, we need a plan for that. So we put it into our parenting plan.
We talked about
after talking about it. Yeah.
Talking to the kids.
Yeah. So we talked about it, and then we brought the kids in and told them what the consequence was going to be. So we said, after supper, you're going to go to your room and you're going to write an apology. And then, that was enough and then we put that into our plan. And so all the kids knew that. And of course, being kids, they're going to test you at least once or twice or 20 times. And so
an hour.
Right. And so the next time it happened, we followed through, and it really helped me, because as being a reactive person, it took the emotion right out of it, because I was like, okay, this happened, so then we do this. And so she just had, and it really helped me I was calm about it, because we already talked about this and she already knew what the consequence was going to be. And so, it didn't take too long. A few times she tested that, and then now it doesn't really happen so much anymore, but every once in a while it'll flare up, or with one of the siblings. And then we just remind them, remember, we talked about this and this is what's going to happen. So.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because, the conversation that I'm hearing so far is that you have the kids and the discipline, things like that. But I think as a parent, it helps you become a better parent. There's some accountability for us too, right? Kind of be careful what you wish for, right? You put it on the vision, and now you have to kind of stick to it, and helps you grow as a parent. Do you guys find that yourself too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the one step of ours is explore your options. And so that's one of the things that when after we talked to Steve and he said, hey, what's your plan for parenting? We're like, wow, we really need to. And that's when we kind of started finding out about other educational options. It's when we realized, okay, well, there's a lot of different ways we can do this. We need to be doing some reading, research, trying to figure out what options are out there. And so that really helped us to grow as parents, I think, that way, to really explore all the different options there are for us. But then also, too, the benefit of having our vision and values already were in place, where we were able to look at those options and say, okay, which of these options are going to be consistent with our vision and values? So I think, not only helping us to grow intellectually as far as, hey, how can we parent, but also helping us to be more consistent in our parenting as well.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot.
I love what you guys are doing, and I think it has a real value, and parents need this. And even if they just get a couple nuggets, like you said, from it. Like that's awesome. Where do people learn more about what you're doing? Where do they get the book? And tell us again the name of the book.
Yeah. So the book is called A Chance to Change. And we have a website called faithfulparent.org. And then we also have our course that you can go through is also on our website. Faithful Parent Academy is what that's called. And there's a lot of blogs, and there's a family huddle guide that's like free resources too on there. And then to get our book, there's a link on our website, but also you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And and then we have a code for listeners to the podcast for our Faithful Parent Academy. If anybody's interested in doing that, you can get $50 off with the discount code LIFE50, like capital LIFE, and then 50.
So number 50, Life 50. Got it.
And then
Awesome.
life that academy, that's .com, right? The link.
No.
The faithfulparents.org, and
And then
then
they can go to
faithfulparentacademy.com, right? Or is it on the same site?
no,
Okay.
faithfulparent.org, and you can get the academies.
Yeah.
And you can you can get it on
Okay.
that website.
Just want to make sure.
Guys, he's Polish. You have to just
Well, some like for me, listen, I'm speaking from the place of somebody got to explain it to me. So yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for your time being Life in our show. You're doing something awesome, and I can't wait to see what happens from here for you.
Yep. Thank you
thank
very
you so
much. Yep.
much.
Thanks for having us.
Man, that was a cool episode. Like I learned some things, and those acronyms are really good. The Stewart and the Adept, those two acronyms they talked about are really, really cool. And they but of course, like, we talked for like a half hour. There's no way for them to get into any kind of huge detail on each of those.
Right.
And so you'll have to pick up the book to learn more about that. But I just want to like emphasize again, like, we talked about this in the intro, but like having that plan, having a vision, most people it catches most people off guard when you say have a vision for your life. Now, to have a vision for your family and your as a parent, like that's a new one for most people as well.
Well, and here's the thing: what I find, this kind of occurred to me as you were talking at the beginning of this episode, is this: most people, when they go into the parenting, when they become parents, I think they do two things. One of two things. One, whether they do it on purpose or subconsciously, they literally copy their parents' parenting style, or at least one of the parents' parenting style, or they didn't like it and they go completely opposite to what the other to the parents were doing. Right. So there is no plan. It's just basically you just do what you, and like, for instance, especially when today's society, look what Amy was talking about at the beginning, like she had in 5 years, 4 kids.
Yeah. God
bless this woman. You know what I mean? And what ends up happening, we become so busy that we become reactive, not proactive. And then, 10, 15, 20 years later, we like, what happened here? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think what you said is the same thing that happens when someone thinks of their personal vision. They either look to other people and I want that, or they're like, I don't want that, but they don't really spend any time to consciously think of and deliberately reflect on what they want specifically. And so you can do this exact same thing with your family as well. And that's really important. The other thing that I think is for you to do this, you probably need a vision yourself, because how do you know what you want? And you should be living it too, right? Because we didn't talk about this, but our kids learn from us by modeling us. And so what the activities, the behaviors, the beliefs that we demonstrate and that show up in our lives, our kids are going to be exposed to that. And so we also have to have that plan for ourselves. One of the exercises we do at the Get a Life Getaway is like, what do you want your children's lives to look like? Right. And so that's kind of a little bit of a precursor, or it's related to what you want.
Well, if you really think about it, we didn't really dive into that particular conversation, but I think a lot of that has to do with that family vision looks like. What do you want your children's lives to look like? So I think when you ask that question, you start to look, what's that family vision look like, so that the kids become, and they get to live the vision that that I want them to live, that I have this vision for them, right? Because think about it, in Life on Air, we talk about who do you need to become to live that vision, because you haven't done up to this point. So I think that family vision that they're talking about allows you to really get clear what that future should look like. And that's when you start putting your culture the family values. You know, I love what they're talking about the culture, man. Who would have thought? Like, think about companies have cultures, families have cultures, but I don't think we're doing it consciously. It's sort of like just there, right?
Yep.
Some culture is like, you know, very peaceful, or it's a funny family, right? They joke around, or it's like a hectic, like there's yelling all over the place, or it's like nobody knows what happens where, those kinds of things. So when you start to define those cultures and bringing the kids into that conversation, which they mentioned, I think is really important, because then they buy into that culture, right? Because they feel like they're part of it, as opposed to just being told.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great observation, man, because there's a lot of overlap between the way you run a company and the way you run your family.
Right. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yep. Love it. Well, hey, listen, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. You got something out of it. Check out the book. Derek and Amy are awesome. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot and take something with you that even if you're an awesome parent already, you'll still learn and grow and improve from. So if you've liked this episode, leave us a thumbs up, give us a review or rating, and share it so we can impact more parents. Because guess what? Like, everybody came from another human. And so the more we can change these family trees, the better off we'll be and make this world a better place. All right, we'll see you next time, everyone. Take care.